Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hazrat Rabi' ibn Hirash rahimahullah ta'ala narrates that Hazrat Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu once sought permission to meet Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu at a time when members of various tribes of the Quraysh were with him. As Hazrat Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu approached, Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu said to Hazrat Sa'id bin al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who was on his right hand side, I shall present to Hazrat Abdullah such questions that he will be unable to answer. Hazrat Sa'id replied, there is none like Hazrat Abdullah to answer your questions. When Hazrat Abdullah was seated, Hazrat Muawiyah asked him, what have you to say about Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu? Hazrat Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu replied, may Allah tabarak ta'ala shower His mercy on Hazrat Abu Bakr. By Allah, he ardently recited the Quran, stayed far from deviation, avoided immodesty, prevented people from evil, knew his deen well, and feared disobeying Allah tabarak ta'ala. He engaged in ibadah during the nights, fasted during the days, remained uncontaminated by the world, and was committed to administering justice among Allah's creation. He instructed what was good, and always did what was good. He was grateful to Allah in all conditions, engaged in his dhikr morning and evening, and he was hard on himself in matters relevant to reformation. He excelled ahead of his companions in terms of piety, contentment, abstinence, chasteness, virtue, caution, self-discipline, and in repaying people for the good they do. May Allah's curses up to the day of Qiyamah be on those who deride him. Hazrat Muawiyah then asked, what have you to say about Hazrat Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu? Hazrat Abdullah replied, may Allah shower His mercy on Abu Hafs, that is Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. By Allah, he was a great supporter of Islam, protector of the orphans, a treasure chest of Iman, and a shelter for the weak. By Allah, he was truly a sanctuary for the pious, a fortress for Allah's creation, and an ally to every person. With fortitude and confidence in Allah, he established Allah's true deen until the time came when Allah made the deen of Islam dominant and subjugated many lands. Allah's name was then mentioned in every direction, every hill, and every spring in many parts of the world. He displayed exceptional tolerance when people spoke offensively, was always grateful to Allah during times of hardship and times of ease, and engaged in the dhikr of Allah at every moment. May Allah's curse until the day of Qiyamah follow the person who harbors enmity for him. Hazrat Muawiyah then continued, what do you have to say about Hazrat Uthman bin Affan radiallahu ta'ala anhu? Hazrat Abdullah replied, may Allah shower His mercy on Abu Amr. By Allah, he was an extremely honorable son-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who kept the company of pious people and was among the most unfaltering soldiers. He stayed awake performing tahajjud salah for nights on end and wept excessively when engaging in Allah's dhikr. Throughout the day and night he remained thoughtful about matters of importance, always ready to do anything of virtue and never tiring of completing anything that would lead to salvation. Among his noble traits was that he stood firmly against every calamity and was the generous sponsor of the Muslim army, especially during the Tabuk expedition, and the sponsor of the well, that is the well of Ruma, which he bought from a Jew and donated to the Muslims. After all, he was the husband of two of Rasulullah's daughters sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May remorse until the day of Qiyamah follow who the person speaks ill of him. Thereafter, Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu asked Hazrat Abdullah, what have you to say about Hazrat Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu? The reply was, may Allah shower His mercy on Abu Hassan. By Allah, he was a standard bearer of knowledge, a fortune of piety, a stronghold of intelligence, and a mountain of good. He was a light to those walking in the pitch darkness, and an unrelenting caller to the great straight path. Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu possessed profound knowledge of the earlier scriptures, propagated the teachings of the Quran, and always imparted excellent advice. He always clung to the ways of guidance and stayed far from injustice, causing harm to others and from everything destructive. He was the best of those who possessed Iman and Taqwa, and the leader of all those who dressed in sewn garments or in unstitched shawls. He was the most noble of those who performed Hajj and Sa'i, the most magnanimous of those who administered justice and equity, and the most eloquent of people save for the Anbiya and the chosen Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was also among those early Muslims who performed salah facing towards both Qiblas, that is the Kaaba and Baytul Maqdis. Can there be any monotheist equal to him? He was the extremely fortunate one to marry the best of women, that is Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, and was the father of the two noble grandsons of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My eyes have never seen anyone like him, and he will never see anyone of his caliber, until the day of Qiyamah, which is the day of meeting. May the curses of Allah and the curses of every servant of Allah until the day of Qiyamah be on the one who curses him. Hazrat Muawiyah then asked, what have you to say about Hazrat Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Hazrat Zubair radiallahu ta'ala anhu? Hazrat Abdullah replied, may Allah's mercy be showered on them. By Allah, they were both extremely virtuous and pious Muslims who remained extremely pure. They were both martyrs and exceptionally learned men. Although they made an error, Allah shall forgive them because of the tremendous assistance they rendered to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the propagation of Deen. Because they were among the earliest Muslims, among the earliest companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and because of the many good deeds they carried out. Then Hazrat Muawiyah asked, what have you to say about Hazrat Abbas? Hazrat Abdullah said, may Allah shower His mercy on Abu Fadl. By Allah, he was the real brother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the delight of his eyes. He was a chosen servant of Allah Ta'ala, a sanctuary for all people and the leader of all the uncles of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He possessed deep insight into all matters, always considered the consequences of everything, and was adorned by profound knowledge. The virtue of others fades into the background when his virtues are mentioned, and the achievements of other families seem insignificant before the accomplishments of his family. Why should he not be such a great person when he was raised by none other than Abdul Muttalib, who was the most honorable of people and the most esteemed of the Quraysh who ever walked or rode?